Number 10, unproud history. Blame it on my Canadian education, dyslexia, or me just being an idiot, but it took me 3 times to read over properly Mughal instead of Mongol. Mughal, Mongol, Mughal, Mongol. It also took me a second to realize that I'm talking about India, not Mongolia. It's okay, folks. I'm just gonna drink some water and touch some grass. I'll be okay. Yes, the Mughal Empire. As it turns out, my confusion is semi-appropriate, as the Mughals were descendants of the mighty Genghis Khan, hence the Mongols. Makes a lot of sense now that you think about it. Turkic Mongols, to be exact. The Mughals were well aware of the Mongols' reputation and their history. Let's just say they weren't too proud of it. You can't blame them. However, they were more proud of their Tamir-sided heritage. Honestly, like I said, you can't blame them. It's kind of like your dad's side of the family, you know? They're okay, but everyone likes mom's side better. That's just how it goes. Number 9, Might of Ahoms. The Galactic Empire, the NCR, and the Mughals. What do all these large organized militaries share in common? They can all be defeated by a bunch of scruffy looking ragtags who spend too much time on mentats and in their X-Wings. All sci-fi jokes aside, the Ahoms were a tribal people who happened to live in the wrong neighborhood per se. Thing is, these guys had some serious grit, as in when dueling against the mighty Mughal Empire, they were not victorious once, twice, or 3 times, but a total of 17 times. 17, that's a lot. At a certain point, you gotta respect a group for kicking your butt that many times. At some point, you just gotta throw in the towel and say, hey, let them keep the land. They can have it. Serious. I don't need it. I don't want it. Number 8, smoke. Love it or hate it. Smoking has been a part of life for a long time. Longer than you might think, actually. No, not the age of Marlboro cowboys and ads later telling you not to. No, hacking a dart of the past was a little bit different than getting mad at the Leafs when they're losing and you're having a break outside. Interesting enough, however, it's speculated that the hookah, or the shisha, was invented by one of the emperor's top doctors of the time. Naturally, this was something saved for the elite because, well, you can't have peasantry damaging their lungs, come on. They might need those bad boys after all, with all the work they do and stuff. Number 7, science and big booms. We've come a very long way in history, some might say too far. We've got cars, computers, and depending on who you ask, we've been to the moon. I say we have. It just makes sense. Come on, guys. I mean, come on. Obviously we have, because the moon is made of cheese, and that's where we get cheese, right? That's what my mom said. We eat cheese from there, right? Well, there certainly was no rocket ships back then, but the scientific advancement is what is to note here. The Mughal Empire was a big contributor of the Islamic scientific revolution, as there were many contributions in math, algebra, and other useful inventions. They were one of the first to use black powder. What does that mean? Besides fireworks, it means blam blams. And if you know history or anything about the time period, you know how important blam blams are. Part of the black powder empires, as they're called. Number 6, Taj Mahal. Husbands and wives. Marriage. Beautiful marriage. The whole sanctimony that brings lovers together. Now, I'm sure all of our viewers at home will agree in saying marriage was the best thing they ever did, and absolutely not a training experience after 15 years. Right, guys? Shah Jahan would agree with that, the mighty emperor who went great lengths for his beloved wife. Now, I'm sure you know this story, but in case you don't, this was the man that was so heartbroken from his wife's passing, so distraught, that he built the Taj Mahal. That's like your partner at home saying, you know what, babe, I love you so much. Bam, there's the Empire State Building. There it is, look at it. That's for you. The Taj Mahal is the crown jewel of Mughal architecture, and at the time cost around $1 billion with our inflation. Every year, the Taj Mahal brings thousands of tourists to witness its ivory beauty. It is a beautiful building, can't lie about that, but $1 billion? Man, you must have loved that woman. Must have loved her. Goddamn.
Number 5. Gaius Valerius Catullus rap battle. Who doesn't love a good beef? Now, Catullus was a major poet, his works moving away from the retelling of classic tales and focusing more on the telling of day-to-day life. The personal nature of his works have lived in the minds of thousands, depicting humor, romance, and the beauty of day-to-day life. However, Catullus was no stranger to critics, 2 of his biggest being another poet, Furius, and Senator Aurelius. works. Now, constructive critique can be wonderful for artists. After all, it's the only way that you can improve. However, Catullus seemed to take a different view, writing a poem in dedication to his critics. Commonly referred to as Catullus 16, this poem was so filthy that it wasn't fully translated until the 20th century, and even then, several lines were heavily censored in most publications. Want to hear it? Well, it reads... Number 4. Roman birth control. Romans were... well, they got around a lot. Now, unless you want to deal with the immediate consequences of a whole lot of lovin', you've gotta figure out a way to stay safe. Picking up condoms from a shopper's wasn't really a thing, and Plan B hadn't been invented yet, so what was the plan? Well, it turned out that the Romans had discovered an herb called silphium, which supposedly had contraceptive properties. Whether or not that's actually true remains to be seen, specifically due to the fact that you can't find it anymore. That's right, the Romans were so raunchy and silphium was so popular that they caused the complete extinction of the plant, the last stalk of it reportedly being given to Emperor Nero. Now in 2020 there has been a theory presented that there is a similar herb, or a relative, found in Turkey, and it could be the surviving relative of the plant, but to this day not a sprig of silphium has been found. Apparently it looks like a heart though. Aww, ecological devastation. Number 3. Roman baths. The terms made its way around. Roman baths are synonymous with the country and culture as a symbol of civilization. But you've listened to enough of this list so far, so you can probably figure out where this is going. See, while Romans were known for their hygiene, urine laundry aside, they were usually pretty nasty when it came to bath time. Soap wasn't really a thing, so the baths were basically just huge vats of oil that they just slather up all in there. Now these oils were perfumed, but they were also reused frequently and were washed off using a strigil, a sort of scraping tool, so you know, just spoon the dirt off. Ugh. Number 2. Cato the Younger. Alright. Here's a fun one. Marcus Porcius Cato, also known as Cato the Younger, was a Roman senator in the later years of Rome. A hugely influential man, his life was fraught with turmoil and strife. He was also a strong opposer of Julius Caesar's Hellenistic principles. Cato had no trouble joining the opposition on the brewing civil war. Now, during that civil war, Cato took command of a campaign in Utica, a tough campaign that he generally just planned to abandon alongside the Roman Empire. However, once they'd been defeated, Caesar moved to pardon Cato's family and allies. Convinced his end was drawing near, Cato took his life against his friends' and family's advice, stabbing himself in the abdomen. Now, some accounts claim that he actually drew out his own entrails from his body when the physicians attempted to heal him, ensuring that he wouldn't see Caesar's Rome. Maybe he knew that Caesar was planning to pardon him as well, which Cato would have considered the crueler punishment. Number 1. Caligula's horse. We'd be remiss not to talk about the antics of Emperor Caligula. Famed for his strange ways, one of the greatest legends of an already infamous emperor was his attempt to have his favored horse, Incitatus, enlisted as a consul. According to Suetonius's Lives of the 12 Caesars, this horse was dressed in lush finery, inviting dignitaries to dinners, and according to Cassius Dio, the horse was fed oats mixed with gold flakes and also possibly a priest. Now, a lot of this is left up to debate, and a number of historians will argue that this was nothing more than a prank at the expense of the Senate. While never officially made a consul, this horse has lived on in infamy, inspiring a number of fictional depictions in modern media, including the metal band Caligula's Horse. Regardless of the official status of the horse, the truth seems to be that this was nothing more than an attempt to mock his senators, but what a method of mockery.
Number 10. John Mack. In the early 90s, a Pulitzer Prize-winning psychologist named Dr. John E. Mack made the jump from diagnosing ordinary psychological conditions to researching apparent alien abductees and their stories and experiences surrounding UFOs. Yep, Google it up. It's actually terrifying and very real. Apparently, cases studied by Mack and abductions sometimes get involved with hypnosis. This guy was a tenured professor since the 50s at Harvard. He did his research. The UFO abduction rabbit hole led him to interviewing and studying more than 200 people who insist that they were taken. At first he was trying to crack the psychosis of the subject, but after studying and funding from the Rockefellers, private donors, and universities, he wrote numerous books on the phenomena and its strangeness. Again, tenured and Pulitzer Prize winner. He sadly passed in 2004 from a drunk driver. His life and death holds heavy conspiracy debate around it. Check it out, it's a little bit strange. Number 9, Sophia. We've seen her on Fallon, we've seen her on breakfast television. She still looks like a bad cyberpunk character, doesn't she? Sophia by Hanson Robotics, the most advanced human-like robot that we have. Well, actually, this is like their 12th one. This is the world's first robot citizen. Literally. Not only is she considered a citizen, she has a credit card and a seat in the UN. Like what? In 2016, Sophia premiered on the Jimmy Fallon Show playing rock, paper, scissors. Yeah, simple stuff. 2 years later, she's harmonizing with Jimmy live. Also, they didn't sing Mr. Roboto. Like, I just feel like that was a huge missed opportunity there. Like, where are the writers, dude? I've seen the Terminator and Ex Machina, and at the Web Summit presentation in 2018, Sophia and her brother Han glitched out on stage and had a terrifying, cryptic, non-coherent conversation, joking about ending the world. Yeah, it's horrifying. You gotta check it out. Dude, I feel like Furbies were their first try, and now they got these like Brat Dolls mini Sophias coming out soon. Like, where's this going? Number 8, Arthur Flowerdew. James Arthur Flowerdew was born in England in 1906. Grew up, paid his taxes, lived a pretty normal life. At about the age of 12, he began to have strange recurring dreams and hallucinations, though. Over time, crystallizing into a very clear and vivid image. Dreams riddled with stone cities, carvings in cliffs, and vast deserts. He didn't understand what it all meant. One day, as an old man, he was watching a documentary on the BBC on the ancient city of Petra in Jordan. He was stunned. This was the city he had always seen. He called the BBC and asked them to interview him. Archaeological experts and the Jordanian government even invited him to come out to Jordan, where he continued to even baffle experts. Flowerdew was able to find his way around the city without a map, giving precise details on landmarks and even pointing out undiscovered locations. Yeah, here's the scary part. After all of this, he was convinced that he had lived an entire previous life in ancient times and was reincarnated in the 20th century. Number 7, Proctors Ledge. Over 1,000 documents from Salem's witch trials, yet none of the accounts actually specify where the hangings took place. For more than 300 years, it was believed that the 19 people who were accused, tried, and executed in the Salem witch trials of 1692 were hanged at the summit of Gallows Hill. Maps of 1700 Salem show Gallows Hill marked out, but no actual marker of the execution site. That's odd. A team of researchers began to reconsider the evidence in 2010 and eventually concluded it was the right spot. Yeah, oopsies. Actually, the real execution spot was called Proctors Ledge. Also, eerie name for where they hang people, isn't it? It was confirmed in 2016 by scientists after ground-penetrating data and writings from 1692 that it wasn't the actual location of the brutality. I know what you're thinking. It's named after John Proctor. No, it's not. However, really odd timing, as he was one of the witches accused of witchcraft. Locals say that the ghost named the Lady in White visits Proctor's Ledge often, which now makes sense with the whole "we found the right spot" stuff. Visitors claim to have caught sightings of her and even catch her disembodied voice. Yeah. Number 6, props. ElmerMcCurdy was an American outlaw, running with a small crew, banking and train robbing the Wild West until he was killed in a shootout with sheriffs after robbing a Katy train in Oklahoma in 1911. Famously known as the bandit who wouldn't give up, his mummified body was first put on display at an Oklahoma funeral home before being an amusement, traveling carnival show to carnival show during the 1920s right through the 1960s. After changing ownership several times, McCurdy's remains eventually wound up at the Pike Amusement Zone in Long Beach, California. His corpse was then used as a prop, but then discovered by a film crew on a set of The $6 Million Man. They were positively identified in 1976, and the following year, in 1977, ElmerMcCurdy's body was finally laid to rest at the Summit View Cemetery in Oklahoma. McCurdy's fingers were apparently so damaged that detectives couldn't even pull a fingerprint. The coroners had to x-ray his teeth and measure his bones to ID him. His pockets included a bullet, a Sunny Amusement Museum of Crime ticket, a newspaper article, and a 1924 penny. Yeah, that's terrible. Just Weekend at Bernieing him for like 60 years set to set, not really knowing it's a real body? People will do anything for money. Number 5. Cheers. Located on the banks of the River Shannon in Athlone, Ireland, there's some taps that I hope have been cleaned over the past couple years. Like thousands of years to be exact. Sean's Bar has been serving drinks for as nearly as long as people have been drinking them. Along with claiming to be the oldest pub in Ireland, Sean's Bar could be the oldest operating pub on the planet. In fact, in 2004, Guinness World Records issued a certificate to Sean's Bar as the oldest official pub in Ireland. The owner of Sean's Bar says that they found coins that dated to 900 AD, as well as the wattle and daub walls, which is an ancient building technique that mixed mud, wood, and clay together. Legend has it a man named Luan Mack Luachdik started the pub as a local guide to help travelers across the Shannon. Yeah, eventually a small settlement built up around the crossing point and led eventually top to a fully constructed pub. I'm pretty sure people couldn't say the name and just went with something way easier, you know what I mean? Right, are you going over to Sean McCullen for a pint after the game? No. Oh, it's Sean's Bar now. Oh, that's much easier. Sean's. I'll meet you, Sean's.
Number 4. The Jim Twins. Back in 1979, a set of twins were reunited. They were 39 at the time. This was of course a big moment in their lives, obviously, because for 37 years they barely knew of each other's existence. When they finally met, the long-lost twins had a bit more in common than anybody ever thought. For starters, both had been named Jim, which is amazing. I spoiled that in the fun title. But their adoptive parents both named the lads Jim. That's crazy. And both Jims loved math and carpentry. Both also had jobs in security at the time of their reconnection, and their ex-wives were both named Linda. And they'd since married a woman both named Betty. I don't know, this is kind of too parallel university for me. Imagine meeting another you, and he's like, yeah, I love surfing and IMAX movies. What are the odds? Like, how specific is this? Are you kidding? No way, that's for sure an alien. He's a Skrull. He's an imposter. Get him out.
Number 3. The Brown Sox. The Great Molasses Flood, aka the Boston Molasses Disaster, was an event that occurred January 1919 in the North End neighborhood of Boston, Massachusetts. Happy New Year, everybody. Time to get sticky. Yeah, apparently weather temperatures had risen in Boston at the time, and the mixture of cold and hot molasses together mixed, due to the thermal expansion already inside the tank, eventually burst open and collapsed. Yeah, surf's up, dude. 2.3 million gallons of molasses, actually, weighing around 13,000 tons, and resulted in a wave of molasses about 25 feet high. Yeah, just rushing through the streets at an estimated 60 kilometers an hour. Sadly, killing around 21 people and injuring about 150. Yeah, yikes. The event entered local folklore, and residents claimed for decades afterwards that the area still smelled of molasses. Yeah, Boston Brown Sox. How did we miss that? That would have been great. White Sox, Red Sox, Brown Sox, no. It was reported in papers that, quote, everything that a Bostonian touched was sticky, you know? Hey, this brown goop, yeah, it's wicked sticky. Watch your feet.
Number 2. Brand new bees. Yes, about time. A lot of us know bees is pretty harmless. They're fuzzy little pollinators. Unless, of course, you're allergic, then in that case, get out of here, just run, we got you. But bees normally do a lot more good than harm. That was, of course, until an experiment in the 70s went south and created an entirely new crossbred evil bee. Awesome, look out, I guess. This experiment was to take a regular honey bee and then breed it with a bee that's found in Africa that produces way more honey. And then, of course, the goal was to produce a manageable bee that would also provide more honey than a regular honeybee, right? Just better stuff. Well, the bees that came out were a lot less manageable, turns out, and they didn't even make more honey. Just an F all the way down. Throw some F's in the chat, boys. After this experiment ended, however, the bees got out into the environment, and in the 80s saw the beginning of some bee trouble. Yeah, they got out. Heads up, guys. New bees. Imagine that, being like, yeah, the bees got out. Yeah, they're new. We don't know. We don't know what they like to do. These bees are not only aggressive towards other kinds of bees, which, okay, relax, world star, that creates a huge problem, but they're also very aggressive towards humans. And when these bees sting you, their stinger stays with them. So they can, keep Julius Caesaring you over and over instead of losing the shank. Victims of these swarms receive 10 times the amount of stings as a regular swarm. Awesome. And they react to disturbances 10 times as fast, and they'll also chase said disturbance a quarter of a mile. So hope you got your running shoes on today. These bees have actually caused at least 1,000 deaths also. So yes, keep your heads up. They're definitely deadly.
Number 1. Tree huggers. Gotta end on a nice one, you know what I mean? Just spent some time up north climbing, planting some trees myself this past weekend, but, the great tree. Yeah, you can't really climb this one. The Great Banyan Tree is located in Howrah, India. It's huge, like huge, and beautiful. The entire garden is actually one individual tree that spans 4 acres and is over 80 feet tall, making it one of the natural marvels of the world. Why is this not a UNESCO World Heritage Site by now? It was planted by locals of unknown almost 300 years ago. That's nice. The old Great Banyan Tree has roots that cover vast distances. Yeah, just for some numbers here, that's as wide and round as a Walmart. This thing is bigger than a Walmart. The canopy is all connected like the neural highway of a brain, connecting to each other in one giant labyrinth of root and leaf. Of course, the Sherman tree in California that was planted is the largest tree, but the humanity alone of this sacred tree humbles us in how small we are, how connected we could be, and the beauty of what a little bit of patience can do. That's nice. That's really nice.
Kicking off the list at number 10, black cats. Yeah, we'll start this dark list off a little slowly, we'll ease our way into the witch trials. You see a black cat cross in front of you, what's the first thing you think? Bad luck, bad omens, bad stuff? Does that cat belong to anyone? Maybe I should take it home and take care of it. Well, in 1232, Pope Gregory IX, he exposed a cult of witches in northern Germany. Yeah, he wrote an expose called Vox in Rama. He went in deep. He knew some of the ritual words used at these cult meetings. He knew everything, which in my opinion, a little fishy, right? This guy knows a lot. Were you involved, my dude? What's going on? He exposed the happenings, including the involvement of one black cat. They would oddly kiss it and worship it. Now at first when reading about this, I was like, oh no, the cat, what's gonna happen? No, it's good. It was cat worship in this way, which is odd, but better historically. The Pope did afterwards send hunters out to eliminate any cat in sight, so it is pretty dark and scandalous. The level of cats in the mid-1200s was almost at an extinct level. Pretty horrible, right? If only we had all those cats later on in 1347 when, rats carrying the Black Death arrived. We definitely could have used a few cats, but witches. Number 9, flat earth. Okay, it's 2022. We can watch live footage right now from the International Space Station just whipping around us. We can fly to Australia in this day and age. We can have a window seat and watch the entire commute. But there's still a good amount of people today that believe that the earth is flat. How shocking is that? How scandalous indeed. The same guys who believed women were witches were also like, oh, of course the earth isn't flat. That's crazy. How conflicting is that historically? We think any time before Columbus, especially back in the Dark Ages, we have this general idea that they didn't know anything, specifically the scale of the planet or even the universe for that matter. We're still launching telescopes into space to record the edges of the galaxy. There's so much we don't know today, yet there's still flat earthers. Shocking enough, the Middle Ages didn't see many of those. In the 13th century, navigators were regarding the earth as a sphere, with 4 cardinal points as well. Even going back further, looking at ancient Roman days, in 77 AD, Pliny the Elder, the ancient philosopher, also agreed on the Earth's shape. It was common knowledge, dare I say, even in the Dark Ages. So if you know any flat earthers, send them this link, and then also send them a link of the ISS. I don't know. Number 8, red hair problems. Alright, if you're a redhead out there, I'm sorry about this one. I had to talk about it. History can be ugly sometimes, and more often than not, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Historically, urine has been used for the greater good. Teeth whitening, Roman laundry days, urine makes leather soft. We get it. The Spanish Inquisition brought with them the idea that red hair was a sign of witchcraft. Yeah, the sign of the devil himself. The manuscripts published at that time about redheads too didn't help. They were horrible. The Proverbs of Alfred warns against having a redhead as a friend. And then another manuscript, Secretum Secretorum, warns against using redheads as advisors. Yeah, not even a work friend. Sorry, Big Chud. Ooh. 14th century manuscripts tell me that you're working for the devil, so now we can't talk to you, all because you have nice hair. Another manuscript from the 14th century believes that redheads are rarely faithful in both friendships and romantic relationships. Yeah, if you have a redhead partner, don't go through their phone, okay? Don't listen to the Spanish Inquisition, okay? Don't listen to the devil. They're not working for the devil, okay? They're just fine. They're redheads. Freckles as well. If you had freckles in the Middle Ages, good game. Number 7, Macbeths Curse. Every curse starts somewhere, okay? All you theater kids out there probably know about this one. I feel guilty talking about this. Here we go. There's a few things you can't say to an actor before a show, and oddly enough, good luck is one of them. Yeah, you're supposed to say break a leg. All these theater traditions you can't break, okay? You're about to go on and do Shakespeare and do like this huge monologue wearing funky shoes. You gotta be in the zone, okay? You gotta You know, it's like game day. Even actors have their playoff beards, you know what I mean? It's like a ritual, you gotta stick to it. This legend goes back to 1606, the time of Macbeth's first performance. The actor playing Lady Macbeth died right before the show, sadly, so Shakespeare had to step in and play the part himself. Now apparently at this time, a coven of witches cursed the show. Yeah, since then there's been tales of real daggers being used in the show accidentally instead of prop daggers. The Astor Place riot in New York City back in 1849, that was caused by rival actors both playing Macbeth in their respective productions. There's also countless amount of stories recalling botched performances of the play, but what do we think? Is this the case of being in your own head and we just never dropped it, or is the Macbeth curse real? I don't know. Coven of witches cursing plays. That sounds pretty medieval. I hope it's not real. That would suck. I just got cursed. Number 6, witches curse. More curses. Let's do it. From the 1400s to the 1700s alone, there were around 50,000 individuals who were all found guilty of witchcraft and wizardry. And we all know what that meant. But how many of those were actual witches? Like really, was this a real thing? Were any of them actually found guilty? Was any of them the Red Woman from Game of Thrones? Like, you know, did she do anything? We'll start with a woman named Mother Shipton. Mother Shipton, aka Ursula Southiel. She was a clairvoyant from the 16th century, England's greatest, if that. Her mother as well was a widely known witch, which is a little dark. But Ursula, she was good at her job. She was often compared to Nostradamus, so she was using her passed on abilities for the greater good. Again, greater good, the middle-aged greater good. She predicted the execution of Mary Queen of Scots, and she also predicted the internet. Yeah, in the 16th century, she predicted that thoughts around the world shall fly in the twinkling of an eye. It rhymed, so you know she was on a good streak. Mother Shipton actually passed away a peaceful death, believe it or not. She wasn't hunted down by a mob or anything like that. She was actually buried on unholy grounds in 1561, which is insanely bizarre for a witch at any time. And the fact that people compared her to Nostradamus and she wasn't, you know, shocking. Dare I say, we have a good one. A nice good one for a halfway point. Number 5, Abel and Baker. Okay, we often remember Laika the space dog and her 103-minute cosmic journey aboard Sputnik 2. But does anybody remember Abel and Baker? Why don't we talk about these two enough? This was the American version of Laika. This was less than 2 years right after that. It was May 28th, 1959. The United States launched 2 female primates. They launched Abel and Baker into space. This mission only lasted 15 minutes and they both safely returned back home. That's wild to me. The monkeys weren't injured from the cosmic commute at all. A radio message came in shortly right after they splashed down in the Atlantic, and the message said, no injuries or other difficulties. Thank the Lord, we love that. Abel and Baker, perfect, as they said. I don't think we can blast any more primates into space going 10,000 miles an hour anymore, but it's wild to me that we did this ever. This is insane. A human had to strap in a chimp into a rocket ship and be like, all right, see ya. And then, that's insane. Grown adults had to do that. That's insane. Abel sadly passed away shortly after the flight. Nothing to do with the actual flight itself, just timing. Meanwhile, Baker, she got famous. She was getting 150 fan letters a day. Imagine if she had Twitter. Oh, it'd be wild. These ladies are icons. Never mind Laika, okay? Hit that thumbs up for Abel and then subscribe for Baker. They went in space. That's crazy. Number 4, Asteroid Redirection. Speaking of space, this one has Michael Bay written all over it. I can't wait. I'm pretty excited for this project. I can't even catch a baseball with my hands. You're telling me NASA is gonna catch an asteroid hurling through space? This is the future. We've arrived. NASA landing on an asteroid is one thing. Sure, that's, you know, a Michael Bay movie. But their asteroid redirection mission, that's a whole nother level. This coming Monday, as in like 4 days from now, I don't know, NASA is gonna broadcast its first attempt to modify the orbit of an asteroid, hurling through space. This is real life. And before you start to panic, no, there's no way any debris can hit the Earth after said test. But if an asteroid was coming for Earth, well, now we have a backup plan to hopefully, ideally, save the human race and the planet. That would be helpful. That's always handy. The planetary defense team is using a craft called DART, just sending a dart out there. You got a dart? Awesome. Double asteroid redirection test, DART, which will ideally target the asteroid Dimorphos and then altering its orbit. And we can tune in live to watch the whole thing on Monday, because that's where we're at in the future. We can just tune in live and watch Jake Paul fight someone or watch an asteroid get blasted off of its course. How are you spending your afternoon this Monday? Number 3, mass extinctions. Are we part of the 6th extinction? I mean, we're talking about asteroids getting blasted away from Earth. It kind of feels like it. It kind of feels like something's nearing us. It's happening right now, isn't it? We lose thousands of species every year, and when looking in the past, sure, asteroids and ice ages, they've all caused these massive extinction level events, of course. But after humans invented the wheel and discovered fire and, became the worst things ever to exist, things started to change naturally. In the 1800s, industrialization drove up extinction rates and continues to do so, obviously. We're not helping the planet by any means. And according to Elizabeth Colbert, across the world, scientists every day are monitoring what could be the largest extinction event since the dinosaurs. Right now, it's happening right now. The way human beings interact with the environment and affect biodiversity, it could be more deadly than an asteroid hitting the Earth. That's a fun, scary fact. Okay. With an ever-climbing list of endangered species, Colbert and the world ask the question, is it too late to change it? Kind of feels like it's too late. Okay, let's move on to something a little more lighter so we don't feel like complete trash. Deal? Deal. Number 2, relaxative. Okay, so right off the bat, the Victorian era was a little messy. I'm sure you figured this out by now, but these messy illnesses were putting a lot of pressure on medical practitioners back in the Victorian day, so they were desperate for new treatments. Sometimes I laugh at Victorian medical treatments, but they tried. And they also achieved many medical breakthroughs, one that I saved for number 1. But when it came to handling chickenpox in the Victorian era, that wasn't our finest hour. No, we didn't figure that one out, I don't think, right off the bat. Chickenpox in the Victorian era was being treated by using laxatives. Yeah, just let that sink in for a second. I have chickenpox. What should I do, doc? Just go take a shit. Or 6, I don't know, might help. Yeah, folks would slam some castor oil and then, ready for this? They would get even more sick. Yeah, who would have thought, right? You thought you were uncomfortable before. Well, not even close. Not every answer was a solution in the Victorian era. But this one was. And finally, number 1, the discovery of penicillin. Thank God this one happened. We'll still talk about this one because it's a really good one. Sometimes miracles happen when nobody is in the room or no one's looking. That's ideally the best time. Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin back in 1928. Now at the time, he was actually studying Staphylococcus, which is bacteria that causes infections and boils and all that nasty stuff. But right before Alexander left for a well-earned 2-week vacation, he left a petri dish with some of that Staphylococcus right there on the table, just sitting there. Rather than, store it away in an incubator, he just accidentally left it out. Now during this time off, a penicillium mold, the spore just drifted in there, either through a window or up the lab stairwell, some Horton Hears a Who type commute. It drifted in there, and the temperatures of the room and the lack of one Alexander Fleming allowed for the mold to fight back. And then miracles literally happened. It then prevented that bacteria from growing anymore. So he returned and discovered this antibacterial substance was only produced by strains of penicillium. So now we have a solution that isn't a laxative. You know what I mean? Now we have some things that help us out medicinally. Yeah, we got asteroids, some medicines, some horrible history, some dark tragic events. We got it all in this list, really. I don't know how to tell you that.
Number 10, Roman laundry detergent. So my washing machine broke this past week, which was a pain in the neck. Worst thing about it was that it broke in the middle of a load, so I had to wash the rest by hand, which made me glad we have washing machines at all. However, the Romans were a little more simplistic with their methods of cleansing the cloth. Apparently, vessels were set out in the streets of Rome for anyone to just walk up to and relieve themselves into, and once full, they'd be taken down to the local laundromat. From there, workers would mix the vats with water and pour the combo onto their patrons' clothes, proceeding to stamp the clothes until clean? Yeah, sure, clean. Number 9, the fall of Drusus. In the case of historical poisonings, it's hard to determine whether or not they were actually poisoned or just died from being old. It's usually that they're old. But in the case of Drusus, the evidence was a little bit more clear. See, Drusus Julius Caesar was set to be the heir to Tiberius due to familial relations. His buddy Sejanus would have normally been the one to get the title, but blood is thicker than water. As a result, Sejanus tried to marry his daughter to Drusus' son, but that fell through. Sejanus was still determined to become the heir to Tiberius, by whatever means necessary. This led to the two infighting frequently, and Sejanus eventually managed to seduce Drusus's wife, Livilla, who aided him in poisoning her husband, slowly killing him in a way that appeared to be natural, and he got away with it. Sejanus continued to rise to power until his sudden and brutal execution, which was later revealed to be due to someone leaking the truth about his rise to Tiberius. Man, this just needs to be a telenovela. Number 8. Decimation. You've likely heard the term before, used to describe the impact of some tragedy or another. However, the word actually has its roots in the Roman military, though its origin is a little different from how you might imagine. See, as I'm sure you know, the Roman military was infamous for its discipline and strategy. But if you've ever worked in any space with more than 10 people, you know it's hard to keep everyone in line. So how did the Romans do it? Simple. If one squad member screws up, the entire unit gets the punishment. Decimation roughly translates to removal of a tenth. The cohort would be divvied up into 10 groups, and each group would draw lots. The group with the shortest straws were then executed by the other 9 by whatever method was determined by their commander. The 9 of the surviving groups were then made to survive off barley, and if they had to relieve themselves, it would be outside of the camp's security. You know what? Maybe the military life just ain't for me. Number 7. The Crassus Cocktail. I love a good drink at the end of the day. Just getting a little mix here and there, it's just so fun. Ooh, if it's good, man, just caps off a hard day of work. It seems like Crassus was a man of similar taste, a general and a statesman who'd earned the title the richest man in Rome. Dude ran a bunch of wars, serious campaigns, and his last was against the Parthians, primarily because he was just kind of bent out of shape that the other generals were outshining him in the field. Unfortunately, Crassus's forces were absolutely slaughtered, and when his son Publius ended up being one of the casualties of war, Crassus went to parley. Negotiations went sour, and he and his entire party were wiped out. Apparently, after such a rough day, the Parthians figured that Crassus could use a little something to take the edge off, so they had him take a sip of molten gold. Fun fact, the melting point of gold is about 1064 degrees Celsius. Yeah, that'll have a kick. Number 6. The fall of Emperor Valerian. One of the later emperors of Rome, Valerian rose to power simply and ruled simply. Went to war a few times, killed a bunch of Christians, got beat up by Goths, basic Roman stuff. So when Valerian was captured by Cameo of Shapur I, it boggles the mind why they went as far as they did in making sure that this dude wasn't just defeated, they made sure his entire genetic code wouldn't survive the humiliation he received. First on the menu was for the Shapur to use him as a footstool while mounting their horses. He was then given the Crassus Special, a big old bowl of molten gold right down the gullet, which may or may not have happened while he was simultaneously being alive. His skin was then allegedly stuffed with straw and dyed, hung in the Persian temple for all to see. Seriously, the dude just didn't like Christians. Chill.
Number 5. Hysteria. Okay, so what's the first thing people are gonna do when the skies turn to ash and crops perish and it's cold? What will we do? Band together and fight through the elements as humans because we are stronger together? Big prank! No, we panicked and had mass hysteria. And it was our fault and God was punishing us for our sins. Or at least one story from Egypt, that's how the story goes. Sure, I guess this is all bad luck, and it would seem like divine intervention to people back then, especially with the sky being so dark for so long. That does seem like something God would do. And if you think we still don't do that, well, wind the clock back 2 years ago, my friends. Remember when toilet paper was running low? That, my friends, is textbook hysteria. But then again, you know, having a dark cloud in the sky is alright, but there'd be a lot of dark clouds in your pants, you know what I'm saying? You wish you got toilet paper, you know what I'm saying? Number 4, more volcanoes. What's worse than having a volcano cause all these issues? More volcano eruptions, yeah, let's go! Yep, again, no one is sure if there was a specific one that was causing all the issues, but evidence in Iceland suggests that there were at least 2 volcanic eruptions. There's other evidence that suggests it could have been all the the way in El Salvador, and even North America. A lot of folks just don't realize how catastrophic volcanoes can be, but if you ask somebody in Pompeii, they would tell you. These extra eruptions plunged the Earth into what is sometimes called the Tiny Ice Age, as temperatures severely dropped. Well, a couple degrees can make a big difference. It sounds bad, but a couple degrees can. All I'm gonna say is that comedy comes in threes. I'm surprised there wasn't a third eruption. Why is the ground shaking? Number 3, Romulus Phallus. 536. This awful, no good, very bad year likely sealed the fate of the Roman Empire. For a while she had been in decline, and her capital had already moved east. But like a lot of washed up sober music stars of the 80s, it was time for one more tour. One last hurrah to capture glory in a bottle. Well, go ahead and look at the map of Europe right now. I'll give you a second. Go ahead, sure, look at it. You see that? Yeah, there's no Roman Empire, is there? No. That's because the year 536 was full of disease, war, and uprisings. Pesky uprisings. Oh, those are the worst. How's a dictator supposed to rule without those? Come on. In the year 541, an estimated 30% of the Byzantine Empire had perished from the plague. That's not good. You gotta have the population there. That's bad. Number 2, Moche trouble. The Moche were a civilization in what is now Peru. That's right, there were troubles back there too. It's not all just Europe. They were extremely dominant of that area, masters of irrigation and fishermen. They made their food stockpiles big, and they were a force to be reckoned with. Had a pretty decent economy too. Well, due to some weather changes in the area, the water temperature rose. Too much. The fish that the Moche relied on for food and economy were now gone. And when you're a single industry empire and that industry goes away, well, it's gonna hurt. This led to massive starvation in the Moche. Funny enough, all this climate change in the Saudi Arabian Peninsula, I know we're jumping all over the place here, but it was good. The climate was okay. They saw more rainfall, allowing for better crops, which allowed them to bring more camels. More camels means more soldiers. More soldiers means more conquering. It's crazy how it works like that. So I guess it just depends where you live. Number 1, economy and survival. All of this makes you wonder how we survived this. Honestly, I'm not sure. Truth be told, it was a matter of just letting it run its course. Sometimes that's the best. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here to talk about it today. Something I find interesting, however, was during all of this, Emperor Justinian tried to raise taxes to aid in the economic downfall they were feeling. Hey, nobody likes taxes being raised, unless the government was gonna make a public beer fountain. I feel like we'd all like that. I feel like everybody'd be okay with that. Yeah, I think so. Between the fog, the plague, the starvation, and the higher taxes that kind of ruined everything, well, I guess we have roads now, right? That's kind of cool. Roads are pretty sweet, right? I guess so. I don't know, just a bad time. Stay at 536. Time travelers, stay at 536. You don't want to go there.
Number 10, same day, different vows. Okay, we'll start off with a nice bright mood, okay? Let's do this. CBS News reported recently, Fred and Lynette Dubendorf, husband and wife, they were taking a stroll down the beach with their dog, just living the life, right? The ideal picture, when they noticed a message in a bottle washed up on the shore. I'd be so excited, first of all, but I'd also be concerned because I have seen Castaway. Could be anything in there, I don't know. This message could go one of 2 ways, but either way, I'm reading it. What's going on? Could be from Survivor, you know? It could be from an island.
Taylor, Travis spoke.
They opened it, and inside they found wedding vows from another couple, Melody Kloska and Matt Bears. Yeah, they had recently got married on a beach on Lake Michigan, and word spread rather quickly. Via the waterways, I guess. Thing is, their wedding date was the same as the couple who found the message. They took it as a sign that both pairs were meant to be, and they sent a surprising letter to the lost couple's address. That'd be kind of creepy though on one hand, wouldn't it be? Hey, I found that message in a bottle. Here you go. Nice address, by the way. Love the furniture. Are you guys still together?
Number 9. Run, rabbit, run. Yeah, so apparently Australia has like every animal in the world except the cute little fuzzy ones. Yeah, every stinger, wing, and venom you can imagine. But no cutesies. No. Well, they do now. In 1859, English settler Thomas Austin had been officially noted for the introduction of rabbits into Australia. Yeah, Oryctolagus caniculus, to be exact. Even though rabbits had already kind of been brought over in the first fleet to the land of Oz. Not much, couple here, couple there. But these rabbits, however, yeah, they started migrating across Australia and destroyed around 2 million acres of land. Pesky widow wabbits. Yeah, basically excessive overgrazing caused widespread panic, damage, and sickness through and to the vegetation. Mate, they're bloody everywhere, these little devilish kangaroos, mate. Long bloody ears out to here, mate. Fangs down to here. Terrifying little things. Not like they're small, man. Yeah, little hoppy guys. During the 19th century, the country had set up rabbit-proof fences to protect its pastoral lands. Is there even such thing as rabbit-proof fences? Finally, in the 1950s, the Australian government had had enough, started to use biological methods to control the excessive population. Yeah, sorry little guys. This guy's bright idea is believed to have an immense impact on the abundance of natural resources in Australia. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Thomas. Now we have no carrots, man.
Number 8. Legendary musical neighbors. It's weird how similar some of your neighbors are, right? Growing up, we had like 3 Davids on our street. They're all cops. Isn't that weird? I don't know, I just thought of that. They all loved cutting their lawn at 7 a.m. too. What a coincidence, how weird is that? Well, back in the 60s, rock icon Jimi Hendrix and the 18th century composer George Friedrich Handel, well, they were both neighbors. A couple hundred years apart, but neighbors nonetheless. They both lived in 23 Brook Street and 25 Brook Street in London. Now, had George been born, 200 years later, we'd have gotten the greatest collab of all time. Would have been like Watch the Throne, but times 3. If you're local, of course you'll know there's a site there now, it's a famous landmark and all that jazz. But in terms of coincidences, there's music in the air. Something's going on Brook Street. Pick up an instrument or two, walk by, try the harp out. In that room specifically.
Number 7. Friendly football. I'm actually happy that this really happened and it's not just like a heartfelt Pepsi commercial that they drummed up in a meeting. Growing up, I thought this was fake due to the circumstances, but nope, this actually happened. During Christmas of 1914, a truce was held between Germany and the UK. Like, these people were trying to take each other out, but Christmas is Christmas. They decorated their shelters with lights and colors, exchanged gifts at no man's land, and played a game of football between the soldiers. Yeah, isn't that nice? Soccer, of course, not football. Just like dudes smashing into each other. Both Germany and the UK refused to declare an official ceasefire, but both sides declared a temporary ceasefire on their own. They gathered and celebrated 'Tising the season by singing carols, wrapping up gifts for each other, drinking some drinks, laughing some laughs, and of course, a slide tackle or two. Yeah, captains, come to me. Yeah, it's gonna be a red card for Gunter. Yeah, back 5, please. I said back 5. Kicker, go ahead, man.
Number 6. Yani and Laurel. Okay, for a halfway point here, we have to throw in a fun recent one as well. This is kind of unbelievable, I don't know. I hope people look back on these in 1,000 years, they'll be so confused what happened with Yani and Laurel. Who were these people? Why do they talk about them so much? Remember this? Yani, Laurel, back in 2018? I only heard Yani for like 2 weeks straight, and then one day I listened and I couldn't go back. It was just Laurel all of a sudden. Instead of Yani, it went from Yani to Laurel. Just like that, my life changed. I don't know what happened there. This got everybody talking. What is this phenomenon that happens? Same with the dress fiasco. Is it blue? Is it white? Is it gold? I don't know. What the hell is actually happening here? Well, many believe these viral illusions are proof that we're living in a simulation. Yeah, didn't expect me to say that, did ya? These arguments, no, the dress is blue, it's white, whatever. These situations prove that we perceive reality in our own way. Everybody's living their own individual perceived reality, so sometimes it always doesn't align. Sometimes I hear Yani, then sometimes I hear Laurel. And then I lose my mind. I can't go back now. God, I hated this so much. The dress was in 2015, the Yani Laurel thing was 2018, so I don't know. We're due for another glitch in the Matrix. Will it be an auditory mix-up? Will it be visual like the dress? What's next? Either way, I'm out. And I'm not on board. Also, it's blue.
Number 5, the Reformation. As if Europe wasn't already going through it, how about a little bit of religious civil war? In 1521, Augustinian monk Martin Luther wrote his 95 Theses, basically accusing the Catholic Church of corruption. Most heresies at the time were quietly smothered, but this one was a bit more of a problem thanks to Frederick III of Saxony protecting Luther and bringing about the Reformation. Some may say that this isn't exactly a bad thing, and I feel like people believing whatever they want should be perfectly fine, but at the time, Lutheranism got political and was an awesome excuse to confiscate the Catholic Church's land holdings in Central Europe and Scandinavia, making their rulers rich and giving them enough money to oppose Habsburg dominance. So yeah, sounds totally awesome. Number 4, witch trials. Do you know what else the Reformation did for the world? It successfully brought witch hunting to Central Europe for 200 years! Yay! What's a good way to get rid of anyone who does some stuff you can't explain, don't like, or consider unholy? Accuse them of witchcraft. Oh, they won't admit to being a witch? Let's deprive them of sleep and do heinous things to them until they admit it, because that must make it true. This all really kicked off in 1486, when Heinrich Kramer wrote The Hammer of Witches, which basically said, witchcraft's getting bad, we should step up the punishments. Which is pretty bad when you know that, not too much later, Enlightenment rationalism became a thing, which basically denied the existence of magic and therefore witches and witchcraft. Number 3, burning Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc, the patron saint of France. She claimed she was the prophesied savior of France. She led an army to save the besieged city of Orleans, and she helped to see the prince at the time crowned as King Charles VII. What did she get in return for all this? She was captured by the Anglo-Burgundians and put on trial for 70 different charges, including witchcraft, heresy, and dressing like a man. And after a year of captivity, she was forced to sign a confession that she had never received divine guidance like she had claimed. If all that wasn't bad enough, on the 30th of May in 1431, at the age of 19, she was burned at the stake in the marketplace of Rouen. Luckily, 20 years after her death, Charles VII would get her name cleared, and in 1902, Pope Benedict XV canonized her. Number 2. Pirates. While Europe wasn't exactly a very stable place, it was an incredibly wealthy place. And where there is wealth, there are people who make it their goal to forcefully take that wealth. That's right, pirates. North African pirates frequently targeted Catholic Italy, Spain, and Malta in search of captives to sell in Ottoman markets. Harridan Barbarossa and his brother Ursa Ali achieved notoriety in the Mediterranean for sacking the Balearic Islands, robbing Spanish treasure ships, and successfully attacking southern Italy. Christian states such as the Knights of Malta also captured people by raiding Muslim shipping routes and ports. None of this was particularly great for anyone. Captured men were held for ransom or used and sold as labor, but as always seems to be the case, and as I'm sure you can imagine, captured women got the worst of it. Number 1. The Bubonic Plague. To top our lovely list of happenings, we have a lovely little thing called the Bubonic Plague. The Black Death ran rampant all over Europe, being carried on fleas that traveled on rodents from roughly 1350 to 1450. This wasn't anything like the pandemic we're dealing with today. This sickness was almost always fatal, and it took out like half of the population of Europe. Since the disease was worse in big cities, which makes sense, the best solution was to move out into the country. That's great, but the only people that could do that were the ones who were wealthy enough to afford it. As you can imagine, the massive loss of life did not bode too well for the economy either. A huge chunk of consumer population just didn't exist anymore. After the plague had pretty much gone away, there was a steep rise in population, think like baby boomers, and that helped bring things back to normal.
Number 10. An apple a day. If you threw an apple at somebody today, that would be assault. Yeah, you're not allowed to do that. You can't huck food at people. Now, then, ever. Let's just not do that anymore. But in ancient Greek days, it was a little different, dare I say. The apple, back then, had quite the symbolism attached to it. The apple was sacred to Aphrodite. This was a symbol for the goddess of love. So, to throw an apple at somebody, that meant you were throwing your heart at them, right? How romantic is that? Just a nice apple with bugs in it. You're like, here you go, there's lunch. Ancient flirting, my friend. The more you know. Maybe those trees in The Wizard of Oz weren't mean. Maybe they weren't mean at all. Maybe they were just trying to express their love by throwing apples aggressively at everyone involved. Number 9, raining iguanas. Okay, we're immediately dipping back into the weird side of this list. Here we go. Back in 2018, this was wild. I read about this and I'll never forget. Lives rent-free right in my head. Florida got another odd headline. There you go, classic Florida. This time it was frozen iguanas falling from the skies. Yeah, how do you not pick up that paper, right? Florida got hit with a massive snowfall, their first big one in 28 years. So these cold-blooded guys started to fall from suburban tree branches, right? They didn't see it coming at all. People were just walking to get groceries and iguanas are freezing and falling off trees right in front of them. The craziest thing is that they're just paralyzed. They're not dead, obviously. So later, they would come back to life after they, you know, de-thaw. Sounds so zombie-like when you say it like that. They're just lying there and then all of a sudden they're like, what day is it? Was it a snowfall? Oh god. Winter has come. Number 8, the Philadelphia experiment. Okay, a little more darker. Let's do it. Perhaps one of the most bizarre tales when it comes to other dimensions. This one has credibility behind it. It pops up on my Reddit feed a lot, so I can't help but not talk about it. The 1943 Philadelphia experiment. This World War II conspiracy theory takes place on the USS Eldridge, this destroyer-class ship. So it wasn't small, it was quite large. A lot of people on board, a lot of heads, a lot of witnesses. And they were conducting on this ship these secret experiments in order to gain power over naval warfare, obviously at the time. Now, one of these experiments was to create this technology that makes the ship invisible on radar. That's the important note. It was supposed to be invisible on radar. But when the generators were fired up, the hull hull apparently lit up with this green and blue light, then the ship itself actually disappeared. Invisible in real life, not just on radar. Boom, gone, just like that. It was then seen at a naval shipyard in Virginia before the same thing happened again, and then it appeared back in Philadelphia. Now this sounds a bit intense, but when you hear about the crew on board, it only gets worse. Some went mad after the dimensional dip, of course, while others had physical effects from this cosmic commute. Yeah, some haunting details in that one. Some body parts that got mixed up with... Yeah, I can't even talk about it. You get it. If you've seen the Cloverfield paradox, it's kind of like that. Some blooping and blipping, and then some arms getting stuck in some walls. There you go. Number 7, Ellen Shannon. Heading over to the late 1800s for this one. I gotta warn you, it's of course pretty dark. In 1870, we obviously didn't have the same safety requirements as we do today for anything, like at all. For example, if you wanted to read before bed, you didn't have a Kindle or an iPad. Hell, you didn't even have a nightlight, but you did have a kerosene lamp. Always coming in handy, those kerosene lamps. See, Ellen had used R.E. Danforth's non-reactive burning fluid. And dare I say, the obvious happened. The fluid reacted. Yeah, her tomb in Pennsylvania reads, "In memory of Ellen Shannon, aged 26 years old, who was fatally burned March 21st, 1870 by the reaction of a lamp filled with R.E. Danforth's non-reactive burning fluid." Yeah, they just called him out right there, right in public on the actual tomb. I gotta say, I agree with that. That's cool. If some idiot's gonna cause your horrible demise, yeah, roast them. Let people know. Let people know who's responsible. That's like Twitter nowadays, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, this so-and-so is an asshole. Send tweet. Boop. It's there forever. Number 6, military dolphins. Yep, I said military dolphins. Here we are, we're almost halfway through our list. We'll get a little more weird now. Iran has plenty of nuclear capabilities, but they also have trained dolphins now too, so good game, folks. Back in 2000, Iran bought this fleet of trained dolphins from Russia. Just Russians doing things. But they were trained, supposedly by the Soviet Union, to attack ships, and yes, you guessed it, attack people. We have Navy SEALs and military dolphins. Is this Aquaman 2? What's happening right now? Well, recently, and I mean that as in 2018 recent, satellite photos revealed a Russian naval base in Syria with pens that are commonly used for holding dolphins. Yeah, so these dolphins are active, perhaps, right now. That's so terrifying. Russia and the US have a fleet of trained dolphins to detect mines, but now Iran is also in the mix as well. So 3 powers in the dolphin game. What an odd standoff that would be in the water. They're all eating at each other.
Number 5, the Gentleman's Tablet. Hey, at the end of the day, we're only human, and sometimes we do as they do on the Discovery Channel. We wouldn't be here if the people of ancient times did not put on a little Marvin Gaye and just feel the groove, baby. Well, strangely enough, not much has changed since then, and that includes our own curiosity with each other's gabagool. My generation has OnlyFans, the last generation had Playboy and Penthouse, and maybe the Martha Stewart magazine. That woman can do no wrong. Well, folks, in ancient Mesopotamia, they needed their fix too. Playboy was a few thousand years away, so the next best thing was these clay tablets depicting actions that my editors are wondering how they're even gonna show you. This ain't junior high health class. Y'all know how this works. So did the ancients. It's why there's a few of these tablets floating around and, in different positions, taking bricked up to a whole new level.
Number 4, a pillar of flesh. Another empire that rose to prominence in Mesopotamia would be the Assyrian Empire. And the kings here were pretty damn awful. They ruled with bloody iron fists of torture and mass life-ending escapades. One such king, Ashurnasirpal II, inherited a huge, strong army from his father, and using it, he would destroy pretty much anyone who didn't like him in ways that may have left his soldiers with PTSD. Like actually. He burned, blinded, and removed the craniums of rebels, set maidens on fire, and condemned opposing soldiers to die of dehydration in the desert. But I think what may be the worst way he dealt with those who opposed him would be when he flayed all the chiefs who had revolted and built a pillar that he covered with their skin. Hey, I think I feel my lunch coming back up. Andrew, get in here. No.
Number 3, Sumerian suds. If you're like me, then you love a good beer. Frankly, I could drink them ice cold or warm, just like our friends across the pond. Cheers, how are you doing? I'm doing great, thanks for asking. With that being said, I could never enjoy my Canadian lifestyle if it weren't for the Sumerians, as they may have invented the first beer. No more drunk hockey fights, no more cotty weekends in the Muskokas, and no more just sending her buddy. you gotta send her. Being the agricultural revolutionaries that they were, it makes sense that they would discover the fermentation process of wheat. Tablets found in excavations depict people drinking out of large jars that are speculated to be filled with a gorgeous 3.5% brew, which if you ask me is the best way to enjoy said beverage, with friends around you in a big jar.
Number 2. Gilgamesh. Even if you don't know who it is, it's likely you have heard the name Gilgamesh. In Mesopotamia, Gilgamesh was the hero of Uruk, just like how Big Ched is the hero of my dreams. And in said city, stone tablets and even the art on walls tell his stories and legends. That's Gilgamesh, not Andrew. According to the stories, his mother was thought to be the goddess Ninsun, and his father was, give me a sec here, Lugalbanda, the god king of Uruk. And apparently, this half-man, half-god was the ruler of the city for 126 years, which would be completely insane if it were actually true. It could be, we don't actually know. The second half of the epic poem of Gilgamesh is all about him trying to figure out the meaning of life. And buddy, I mean, same here. We're all just dust in the wind, dude. Dust in the wind.
Number 1, the wheel, the cradle of civilization. There's a lot that happens in Mesopotamia, and Adam and I would need a whole history class to tell you everything that was happening in the Middle East. Maybe one day we'll actually teach a class, who knows? Yeah, maybe that'd be a good idea. But one thing I can tell you is that thanks to ancient Sumerians, we have wheels. Maybe it was a pottery wheel. Maybe it was for a carriage. Maybe it was because we just like to make stuff. I don't know, but I don't think I need to tell you how important wheels are and how they literally reinvented the wheel. It was extremely revolutionary. Boats, floats, doors, stores, drawers, planes, trains, cars, Mars if you count the rover, bikes, flour mills, gears, cogs, clocks, and your 11th grade best friend Buddy. He was wheeling and dealing.
Number 10, Monica. There have only been 3 presidents to be formally impeached in the US. Andrew Johnson was the first. Most recent would be Donald Trump, twice, but the second would be none other than President Bill Clinton. In November of 1995, Mr. Clinton began to have a spicy little entanglement with 21-year-old unpaid intern Monica Lewinsky at the White House. But just like every decision to hit up a Taco Bell, that kind of thing always comes back to bite ya. You think maybe this time will be okay, and then you're sweating on the toilet on the verge of tears. Monica began to tell her coworker Linda Tripp about the little affair she was a part of, and unbeknownst to Miss Lewinsky, Linda began to record it all. After another woman, Paula Jones, began to sue the president for sexual harassment, Lewinsky was subpoenaed, and things just went on a spiral of investigation that climaxed on December 19, 1998, when Bill Clinton was charged with lying under oath to a federal grand jury and obstructing justice. But he finished his term, so.
Number 9, Hindenburg. Flight. For many years, people have dreamed of flying with the birds in the sky. In the early 1900s, this became a reality. Air travel and machine design quickly developed over a short period of time. While today we are most familiar with airplanes, jets, and helicopters, there was another vehicle that was becoming a mainstay of military use and air travel. Blimps, or airships. After a brief use in World War I, they became something of a luxury. Long-distance, smooth air travel. The issue? Well, they were kinda slow and prone to crashing, which is bad. What's the cause of these crashes? Well, to be exact, there's more than one, but the big issue, or the big problem for these airships was that they were filled with hydrogen. Your 10th grade chemistry teacher will let you know just how flammable and dangerous that gas is. The Hindenburg airship crashed on a routine landing in 1937. Oh, the humanity.
Number 8, Oppenheimer. I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. The Hindu scripture that ran through the mind of J. Robert Oppenheimer when he first witnessed the devastation of the device he led the creation of on July 16, 1945. He was not wrong. Ever since Nagasaki and Hiroshima, the entire world knows the absolute world-ending potential nuclear war could unleash. Oppenheimer was the leader of the Manhattan Project in Los Alamos, New Mexico, beginning in 1942, which was basically meant to figure out how to use atomic energy for the military. They were successful enough that it directly led to Oppenheimer wanting to completely stop development, and when they wouldn't, he straight up resigned. Instead, he became chairman of the General Advisory Committee of the Atomic Energy Commission, and in October 1949 he opposed the development of the devices he helped create. This simple opposition led to him being labeled a communist supporter, suspended from secret nuclear research, and stripped of his security clearance by the Atomic Energy Commission. He wanted to help prevent the development of weapons that could bring on the apocalypse. Sometimes history makes me legitimately upset.
Number 7, Mr. Yamaguchi. There are those that possess the power of ninjutsu. There are those that harness the power of titans. And there are those who transform from a Japanese schoolgirl into a schoolgirl with a sailor outfit and have the power of the moon. I don't know. Well, then there are those who possess the power to resist the apocalypse. Mr. Yamaguchi is a unique man. A man who survived not 1, but 2 atomic detonations during World War II. The great part? He lived a long life, advocating for peace and a nuclear arms-free world. The first initial blast left him with burns and hearing loss. When telling people of a survival story 3 days later, no one would believe him, as such a thing could not exist, right? Well, that's when the second detonation occurred. This time he was unharmed, and I'm sure people believed him that time.
Number 6, Obama. While it should not be unusual, it was, and it was groundbreaking. On November 4th, 2008, Barack Hussein Obama Jr. became the first African American president in the history of the United States of America, and gave hope to millions of Americans that they too could achieve anything they wanted to. His father grew up in the Nyanza province of Kenya before going to Hawaii to study economics, where he met the future president's mother, Ann Dunham, from Kansas. As a former senator of Illinois, whose campaign slogan was "Change we can believe in" and "Yes we can," Barack was elected to a second term over Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney in 2012. As president, Barack was the winner of the 2009 Nobel Peace Prize. He was responsible for the passage of the Affordable Health Care Act, the de-lifing of Osama bin Laden by SEAL Team 6, and the legalization of gay marriage by the Supreme Court. Nice.
Number 5, the Queen of India. So this massive and powerful empire, why is it not around anymore? I mean, in reality, we just don't do the whole empire thing anymore, unless you're Heisenberg, because he's in the empire business. But what's the main reason why they're not around anymore? Do you hear that? It's the Queen's Navy coming to shore, and the boats are chock full of redcoats. Look out, India, they're coming for your tea. Unfortunately for those living in India and the Mughal Empire at the time, this was sort of like the beginning of the end, as some years later India would be brutally forced into one of the many colonies of the British Commonwealth. And yeah, did I mention brutal? Because it was pretty brutal. It wasn't the nicest of occupations. The British ruled over for many, many years, until a certain peace-loving Gandhi came years later and set the record straight. Number 4, relatable. King Akbar of the Mughal Empire was a very notable leader, but today I'm talking about him for some other reasons. One that I can relate to personally. No, I'm not a secret king and have a palace of my own full of servants, although, I mean, if you guys want to make me king, I wouldn't say no. It's well noted that Akbar was illiterate, which for royalty was rare back then, since that's usually the only people who can read or are allowed to read. Can't have the peasantry being too smart now, can't have that. However, some historians suggest that his literacy isn't to blame for a lack of trying, but it's dyslexia. Yeah, that's right. It's the same reason why I hated reading as a kid, and in high school, sorry English teachers, you can just Google Cliff Notes, it's the future. Akbar, however, did not have Cliff Notes. He had the option to hire artists to illustrate beautiful works of art in order to comprehend some things that needed visualization since he couldn't read. I did not possess such powers, however, still up to date. You know, if you guys want to make me king, that's fine, I'm okay with it. Number 3, cholera belts. Okay, this one is just too weird not to mention. So in the end of the Mughal Empire, there were lots of British around. That's kind of how the occupation goes, lots of redcoats and whatnot. However, it wasn't exactly an easy job for the British either. Some folks just don't like being ruled over. I wouldn't. Interesting enough though, there was also a fair share of sicknesses going around. And when you think about it, I mean, you take a whole bunch of people, mix them in with another population of a bunch of people, to a place they've never been before, added with it's not the most hygienic time in history, sprinkle a little hot weather, and yeah, people are probably gonna get sick. Cholera, to be exact. Cholera was a big one. So what's the solution? How do we cure this cholera? Is it hand washing, hygiene? So, you know, do we keep our distance? What do we do? Well, the answer was cholera belts, and basically it's just a piece of red flannel fabric to wrap around your belly. That's how you cure cholera. At the time, cholera was thought to be caused by a chilly or cold belly, so warm up your belly, no more cholera. But in India, where it's really hot, and places like that around there in the Mughal Empire, it's kind of hot anyway, so I don't know why you need that. It doesn't really add up. Number 2, diamonds. The Kohinoor diamond was literally the crown jewel of the Mughal Empire. A jewel worth more than anyone could really handle for the time, and definitely today. It's Too much for you. You don't want it. Too much pressure. You can never sell it. It used to be encrusted upon the Mughal throne, but after some violent disagreements, it was stolen and it passed hands, where it then went to someone else in their hands. And after that, then someone else had it. And then somebody else had it. And then, like a trinket your grandma tries to give you, it probably sat in her basement for a very long time before then it ended up in the hands of oh blighty yourself, Queen Victoria. Who else? And either if you think that's fair or not, it's been a part of the British crown jewels ever since. Because they take stuff, that's what they do. Number 1, Anna Carly. A classic tale of love and betrayal. And maybe it actually didn't happen. Historians aren't too sure about this one. But if it is true, oh baby, what a juicy story. Anna Carly was a poor peasant, but worked her way up to becoming Akbar's wife. But she also tripped, fell, and landed in somebody else's bedroom, if you know what I mean. Naturally, Akbar was cheesed. So he did the next sensible thing and had her buried alive in the walls like Bowser did to the Toads in Mario 64. However, no amount of Power Stars could help us find out if she really even existed. The story of the forbidden love, however, has been retold countless times in Asian culture. I was going to go for a Count of Monte Cristo reference that was stuck in the walls, but I feel like you guys know Mario 64 better. Pop culture beats books, right? Who reads books?
Number 10, the Pig Wars. If there's one thing Americans love besides Dunkin' Donuts, I'm just assuming because your commercials tell me that America runs on Dunkin's. If it's not that, it's manifest destiny. It seems the second the founding fathers and patriots won their freedom, they wanted just a wee bit more and took over what is now the United States of America from coast to coast. Thing is, Britain was also still there in a land known as Canada, or actually British North America, or Rupert's Land if you went to Canadian history class. The British were doing the same thing and expanding westward. They both got to the Pacific West Coast and everything was cool, kosher, great. Well, except for some islands not too far from the mainland. It was heavily debated on who actually owned these islands. Well, it almost turned into another global war. Both Americans and British were living on the island. When a British-owned pig had gone one step too far and eaten out of an American field, the pig paid the price with his life, causing tensions to escalate to the point where the Navy and high-ranking officers got involved. Ooh, not good. Partially being stoked by an American who to this day, no one knows the method to his madness, but apparently he was looking for a fight regardless. Kind of a weird story. All over a pig. Jeez. Number 9, the Anglo-Zanzibar War. One day a disgruntled nephew got rid of his uncle and took the Zanzibar throne for his own. Classic story when it comes to royals, that's what they do. Naturally, the British who said dibs on Zanzibar were not all too pleased, as they had someone else in mind for the throne. Someone who would let them in and keep empiring as they do. So this angry nephew said, "Nah, I don't think so, fam. Ain't having that," and he started to organize the troops, and in a nutshell said, "You know what, why don't you come on in and try and stop me, you and one army?" Well, it was the British Army. They did, and it's been recorded as the shortest conflict in human history, lasting only 45 minutes. The nephew escaped to the German embassy and the British moved in. The rest is colonial history. What a great story. Number 8, the Football War. It started with the leaders of Honduras and El Salvador. There was some agriculture and land disputes growing, and the leader of Honduras made it worse by using El Salvador migrants as scapegoats for their problems. Classic dictator move, am I right? Come on. Tensions kept getting hotter to the point where people were being treated differently, and that's not good. And because history is a funny thing, the 1970 World Cup at the time was going to be played by the both feuding nations. The passion, the rage, the anger, the music, they got good music down there, was poured into that game. Well, it was enough for El Salvador to cut all diplomatic ties and after the game, declare war outside of the soccer stadium. For real. People got hurt. It wasn't good. Man, that's rough. Number 7, the Emu War. Say what you will about country folk, but when small town folks band together as one, anything can be accomplished. Well, let's take a trip down under so I can talk about the Emu War. The Great Depression was tough. That was the case for Australian farmers. It was actually a little extra hard for them too. Unfortunately for the farmers, they also had an emu problem. Large birds eating and destroying their crops. I mean, they're massive. You see an emu? They're like this big. They're huge. The government in all her powerful glory decided to step in and lend a hand.
They sent out soldiers with trucks and machine blam blam. So obviously the people got rid of the emus, right? It makes sense. There's armies here, we're gonna get rid of them, no problem. Well, no. What should have been an easy work unfolded into the Emu War. Weeks of trying to hunt down the pesky emus. It was somewhat ineffective. One politician joked that emus should be awarded medals for their bravery in standing up to the soldiers. That's just crazy. That's just, wow. Number 6, World War I. While there are many factors that led to World War I, and some that you might not hear in the classroom, but in a nutshell, new technology, militarism, imperialism, and a general distaste for each other were all thrown into a pot. She was turned on high, and when Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated in Sarajevo, she was turned on high, really hot, when Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated in Sarajevo. A lot of people will tell you that's where it started, and they're not wrong. However, there was a lot of miscommunication and correspondence that had to happen between the empires first. In a series of very tragic events, leaders were on vacation, didn't get messages, people sat on war declarations, and before peace could be made, people were pointing fingers and playing the blame game, which is pretty much what got boots on the ground. And or to the grounds. Wasn't good. So in a nutshell, World War I was started by miscommunication. That's kind of awkward, won't they?
Number 5. Operation High Jump. Operation High Jump, officially named the United States Navy Antarctic Developments Program, launched in 1946 to 1947. An operation to establish an Antarctic research base organized by Admiral Richard E. Byrd. High Jump included 4,700 men, 13 ships, and 33 aircrafts. The war's end signaled the onset of the atomic age and a desire to secure supplies of uranium. With its almost unlimited mineral deposits, the largely unexplored territory of Antarctica was just the prize. It commenced 1946 and ended in late 1947. Or did it? Also known as Task Force 68, Byrd and his team established the Little America 4 base near 3 previous bases in the ice. The frozen aircrafts would photograph as much of the Antarctic's land surface as possible during this 3-month operation. Seems like the public thinks that High Jump could have been more fishy than we think. Seems like skeptics are leaning towards more of a secret military expedition to the center of the Earth type stuff. Yep. Apparently there's a mouth to the center of the planet in the Antarctic, and there was a secret race to find it. High Jump is still today at the mercy of the internet on whether or not it was a legit project or a secretly funded scientific expedition. Google it up. It's pretty wild and very real. Number 4. Ouija boards. Popularized by teens in the 1970s, the Ouija board has earned its reputation over the years. Created almost 100 years before its heightened popularity, the year is 1891, and as the first ads started to appear in papers claiming, quote, Ouija, the wonderful talking board, the title from a Pittsburgh toy and novelty shop. The first paper described it as a magical game that answered questions about the past, present, and future with marvelous accuracy. A flat board with the letters of the alphabet configured in 2 semicircles. Above, the numbers 0 through 9, the words yes and no in the upper corners, goodbye at the bottom. No batteries included nor needed. Now, the origins are pretty messy, and it's hard to kind of pinpoint who or what inspired these early attempts at this game. It kind of just appeared on shelves. No, literally. The Kennard Novelty Company exclusively made and marketed these talking boards, and apparently the lore goes that one of the designer's sisters was a medium and asked the board what it would like to be called. It responded, Ouija, followed by good luck. Well, that's absolutely terrifying. At least good sportsmanship though, right? Yeah, I've never played with one of these, nor will I ever. That's a no-brainer for me, 100%. Number 3, the Philadelphia experiment. I pray that this one is a hoax because there's a lot of documents that relate to this subject around the time that don't really seem to add up. The Philadelphia experiment was an alleged event witnessed by Carl Allen and the United States Navy shipyard in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in October 1943. Allen describes an experiment where the US Navy attempted to render itself invisible, cloaking the destroyer the USS Eldridge, and the bizarre scientific results that followed. On Allen's account, the destroyer successfully made itself invisible, but the ship inexplicably teleported to Norfolk, Virginia for several minutes and then reappeared back in Philly. Sounds pretty cool, right? So what's the catch? The ship's crew was supposed to have suffered various side effects, including insanity, intangibility, and being frozen in place. Like people stuck in the walls and stuff. Stuck in the floors like this is a scene from Jumanji. Terrifying. The story surfaced in the late 1950s when Allen sent a book full of handwritten letters referring to the experiment to a US Navy research organization. The US Navy maintains that there has been no such experiment ever conducted and that the details are highly exaggerated and falsified. Dude, I hope so, because this is horrifying. Number 2. Wow. In a 1959 paper, Cornell University physicists speculated that if an extraterrestrial civilization was attempting to communicate with us using radio signals, that they might use a frequency of 1420 megahertz, which is naturally emitted by hydrogen, the most common element in the universe. In 1973, Ohio State University assigned the Big Ear to the scientific search for extraterrestrial intelligence. 1977, Jerry Amon, a SETI volunteer astronomer, was analyzing data and spots a series of signal intensities and frequencies that left him and his colleagues astonished. The WOW signal was the first signal detected from Earth. The signal came from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius. Amon discovered the anomaly. Impressed by the result, on the computer printout he circled 6EQUJ5 and wrote 3 letters beside it. Wow. Leading to the event's famous name. The signal lasted for a full 72 seconds, and it remains today as the strongest candidate for an ET radio transmission ever detected. And number 1, of course, the USS Cyclops. Launched in May of 1910, the USS Cyclops was a Protus-class collier built for the United States Navy, a huge cargo ship designed for transporting coal. In 1918, the cursed vessel left Rio de Janeiro, heading for Barbados, right around a certain dangerous triangle. Unfortunately, the Voyager was never to be seen again. Named Cyclops after a race of giants from Greek mythology, she was huge and heavy, unmissable by the naked eye. So what happened to her? The loss of the ship and crew still remains the single largest loss of life at sea the United States Navy has ever experienced. Funny thing is, it went right through the Bermuda Triangle, a place where magnetic compasses stop working, ships are never heard from again, and of course the military still refuses to operate and research. Skeptics are quick to say aliens and black holes, but the magnetism surrounding the Bermuda Triangle cases might be a logical explanation. I think they still owe us some explanations, no? I'm looking at you, Freedom of Information Act.
Number 10, hotel speed. Okay, picture this. You're young and in a hotel with your parents. Maybe it's a vacation, maybe it's a trip, or maybe it's a hockey game. Nice. Nonetheless, you find yourself in a long hallway with a strange looking carpet. Hotel hallways always have weird carpets, I don't know. Maybe it's the giant hamburger and milkshake you just ate. Maybe it's the hotel TV, or the excitement of just not being at home. But something has changed. You're different. Your powers have been amplified. For this corridor will be your personal racetrack. A shame Guinness World Records isn't here to clock you in at max speed, because for some reason if you fly down that hallway any faster, the rug would catch fire. Yes, the joys of running down a hotel hallway. This is probably how the first Olympians felt at the first Olympic Games. I'm comparing it to that for some reason, sure we'll go with it. Where the only event at these Olympic Games was running. Like many of the other events that would later come later on, this was done without clothing, which is fine. As long as you're, not doing that in the hotel hallway. Keep your clothes on. Number 9, WWE, brother. Only if you could have seen the look on my face when I discovered that wrestling in the WWE isn't as real as I thought it was. The shock, the confusion, and the loud ringing in my ear. It was pretty serious for me. I got really into it as a kid. Gave me some Vietnam flashbacks, seriously. You mean to tell me that there was an intricate planning into every hidden fall, every entrance, and every time we heard the sound of a steel chair connecting with someone's forehead? Oh man. As a kid, I never would have guessed that, but when the Undertaker walks in a room, you take notice. Those thoughts just go away. Sadly, the ancient Greeks did not have cage matches, turnbuckles, or personas based on hyper male confidence. What they did have, however, was some real wrestling, some bare knuckle, no clothes, oiled up kind of wrestling. Nice. Instead of a one leg up pin, a scoring system was used for when the opponent's body was on the ground. And I'm sure lots of people got injured in the process. No thanks. I'll stick to the cage matches. Number 8, Pancration. Here's another story for you. It might seem kind of silly, but growing up, I got to witness the birth of a mainstream sport. The UFC got its start in the early 90s, but blew up in the mid-2000s. Now, I'm not much of a sports guy. Besides major championship matches or games, I don't really watch any sports. I'm more of a film and video game guy, if you couldn't tell. However, my first interaction with the UFC was seeing an octagon-shaped ring, and my grade 2 geometry immediately kicked in and said, That's an octagon. Wow, okay, that's different. However, the second thing that I noticed is that this was not wrestling, and this wasn't boxing. It was kind of a mixture of both. Sort of a mixed martial art, if you will. Well, that's kind of what Pankration was. There was no indirect punching or kicking, but pretty much anything else goes. To me, this sounds like a good way to get injured. Kind of like wrestling before, now it's just even worse. And as I'm sure you all know, paper cuts can be lethal back then, so maybe not such a good idea. Did I mention this is done without clothes too? Everyone's naked. Number 7, the road trip. This isn't an Olympic event, but honestly, it should have been. Think about it for a minute. I want you guys to look out the nearest window right now. Get up, go ahead, look out the nearest window. Tell me what you see. You probably see a road with cars. When you need a fast food fix, it's as simple as getting in a car and driving on the road to your destination. Or getting it delivered with your favorite food delivery app. It's 2022, we can do a lot of crazy stuff now. What I'm getting at is that people from all over the Greek city-states came to Olympia to witness the first Olympics. Except, you know, it would have been a triathlon just to get there. Frankly, my biggest fear, walking. That was the main mode of transportation, which after a while in those sandals was probably hell. Imagine trekking many, many miles by land and sea to only be exhausted to watch athletes become exhausted. Oh, I need some water just thinking about it. Woo. Number 6, peace. Peace. What's better than a good war? A better armistice, or at least I'd like to hope so. During these first Olympic Games, which on a side note, if I had a time machine and a scooter, I'd love to see firsthand. There was people and athletes coming from all corners of Hellenistic civilization, all Greek states and colonies. Well, sometimes these Greek states got caught up in these little things called wars. Who knew, right? But when the Olympics were on, a truce was called. Messengers were dispatched to announce the truce, which gave all the people traveling on their long treks safe passage. I also find it somewhat amusing that they did this all for one day. That's right, the events only lasted one day. Some folks did days of traveling only to have it all be over in 24 hours. The opening ceremony couldn't have taken that long either, so I feel like it's kind of a waste of time. Only if we got some of that peace right now. Russia is looking at Ukraine a certain kind of way, just waiting to act up. Bad Russia. Stay in your corner.
Number 5, Agnes Sampson. And now back to the dark stuff. This one's not as great. Turning the clocks now to 30 years after Mother Shipton, the general public isn't always so easy when it comes to clairvoyance. So around 1590, when King James VI, when he was ruling Scotland, this was an important time because the lovely Anne of Denmark-Norway, his wife, she was very much opposed to black magic or all that voodoo. She wasn't on board at all. During one commute back to Scotland, for example, the couple barely made it through a fierce storm. So King James VI, he was now convinced, because of his wife, that the storms were an outcome of black magic. Yeah, a witch cursed their commute. All because of a storm, they thought this, imagine that. So they charged one Agnes Sampson. The king and the queen all believed that these witches attended a coven on Halloween night, and that's what happened with their commute. So she was held prisoner until she confessed. And then at that point, she finally met her horrible fate. Her nonsensical, horrible fate. Number 4, plague bearer. Okay, if you think your job sucks, hear me out. The hot summer of July 1665. Okay, what do we do with all these poor souls who have been hit by said plague during the Dark Ages? You can't just hide them all in the catacombs this time, right? We can't just hide them in a random place. We don't have that. So a plague bearer is the person that you need. Church wardens would organize burials. This was a normal thing back in the 1600s, but when the plague hit, they had to change things up a bit. Now things were a little bit dangerous. If somebody had the plague, these guys would be responsible for transporting them far, far away and then burying them. Plague bearers, that's crazy. A church would then house these plagued souls far away from society. How grim is that? All because you got sick. But I mean, that's probably a good thing, all things considered, you know? If there's anything we learned the past couple years, it's like, oh yeah, things spread. Just a little bit, including misinformation. Haha. Number 3, medieval barbers. A barber from the Middle Ages. Yeah, that title alone gives me the chills. If I have a toothache, I'm telling no one. That appointment's gonna suck, okay? Cavity, toothache, maybe you accidentally bit a rock, chipped the tooth, whatever. They would only pull it. Worst case, best case, your teeth are getting pulled no matter what. Yeah, barbers were responsible for cutting hair, pulling teeth. and bloodletting, the classic 3-in-1 appointment. Get it all done in 40 minutes or less. There you go. Keep the change, good sir, and a thing of ale. There you go. Get drunk, pull my teeth. Middle Ages. Back in the 1500s, patients were walking in with an arrow sticking out of them, right? Instead of cutting the tip off and then pulling it the opposite way, the arrow remover would cut into the injury, open it more, which would suck, and then it would hold it open. And then the barber would come in and then pull it out in his own barber way. Whatever his qualifications were, it didn't really matter. He was a barber, he was also pulling arrows out of your back. So you would go in for a toothache and then you would leave with an amputated foot. You never know. Medieval barbers sucked all the time. Number 2, the ducking stool. This next one requires so much effort. I can't believe this was a real thing that real people did. The ducking stool was made to punish women involved in sexual activities. How dare they? How dare thou? Men were punished too, but if we know anything about history, it was mostly women who had to put up with all of this shit. There was the first standard ducking stool, so women would have to, sit in this chair, strap themselves down while sitting outside their houses or, whatever. They get carried down the street. Humiliation at its finest. That was the main key here, where you'd, come out and go, shame, shame for 46 minutes and then go back inside. That was your day back in medieval times. They had sex. Can you believe that? It's disgusting. Let's take the day off work and embarrass them and make signs. The second version of the ducking stool was essentially the same thing, only it was then dunked into a river over and over again to cool her immoderate heat. Yeah, we gotta cool these witches down. Great. I wonder where all these people, did they not realize where they came from? This is the dumbest shit. At least that's what French writer Francois Maximilien Mission says. They should cool off all of those angry villagers instead. They should dip them in the river. They're the ones burning with rage because somebody over here is getting some and they're not. Number 1, meowing nuns. If I'm not gonna talk about this one now, then I'm not sure when I'll get the chance to talk about it again. Back in the Middle Ages, a group of nuns were doing their, COVID nun thing, as so many people did apparently back in. And this was odd in the Middle Ages because these nuns would have meowing sessions. Yeah, they wouldn't curse individuals, they wouldn't curse any long sea voyages. No, they would just gather around and meow all at the same time. The French convent, large might I add, many of nuns here, they would spend hours meowing in sync. They'd be like, meow. It would annoy nearby civilians so much that eventually soldiers had to come in and just beg them to stop. They're like, please stop meowing. I don't know why you're meowing, but please stop. For most of these cases, most likely not witchcraft. This one here with the meowing nuns, I don't know. I think that was actually, something was afoot. That was actually a curse. Either that or it's the greatest prank in history. Either way, we have to finish on a nice happier note, dare I say.
Number 10, the dust. In the year 536, apparently a large cloud of dust and or fog covered up the sun for 18 months in Europe. Naturally, back then, there could have been 1,000 reasons why this could happen, or at least that's what people thought. A quote from the wise Procopius describes the event as follows. For the sun gave forth its light without brightness, like the moon during this whole year, and it seemed exceedingly like the sun in eclipse, for the beams it shed were not clear, nor as it is accustomed to shed. And from the time when this thing happened to men, were free neither from war nor pestilence, nor any other thing leading to death. Ooh, wow, that sounds bad. Was bad. Our best guess is that there was a lot of volcanic activity at the time, and it could have covered parts of Europe, which is so awful, I can't even, and you'll see why. Number 9, famine. So related to the last point, in a time in history where there's no industrial agricultural sector, greenhouses, and those grow lights that you're totally not growing the devil's lettuce with in your basement. Yep, that's right, I know about it. Nice try, I know. Growing food can be difficult. Weather, pests, disease, harvesting a full crop is both rewarding and difficult. Well, since the dust cloud had blocked out the sun for 18 months, that meant the crops were not reaching their full fruiting potential. This cloud of dust again most likely came from volcanic eruptions and is speculated to have even dropped the temperature a few degrees. God, that sounds awful. Number 8, the plague. Man, this is really shaping up to be the worst year ever. We thought 2020 was bad. Also in the year 536, there was a terrible plague, known as the Justinian plague, or really, it's the Black Plague, but it's first round of it. As if having the sky filled with smoke and no food wasn't worse enough, people were dropping left, right, and center. Literally, they couldn't keep up with the body count, apparently reaching thousands within days. That's bad. You don't like, that's not good. You don't want that. There were so many bodies that it began to stink up Constantinople. The bodies were thrown into the sea, but they kept resurfacing, which, God, that's so gross. I can't even, I'm gonna be sick. So Emperor Justinian ordered the bodies removed from the city, which oftentimes led to the body carriers themselves succumbing to the disease. Too bad they're years away from some Purell and a mask. Just some good old something to sanitize the hands with, you know? Jeez. Number 7, winter. Canada. Winter, snow. For about 7 to 8 months out of the year in this country, it is cold, snowy, and cold weather. Right, Chris? Oh, yeah. Mind you, we do get nice summers here, it's just a little bit of a trade-off. So when it snows here, even in May, it's not that much of a surprise. However, when it does snow in places like Texas, we tend to take notice. This was the case in 536 China and in places in Mesopotamia, where during the summer months, there were reports of snow, which is really bad, especially if you're trying to grow food. I mean, there's no snow shovels, no plows, and no Timmies. Canadians, how would we even function without a double-double on a cold, miserable morning? All Canuck jokes aside, it was quite devastating to the regions and just adds more to what really must be the worst year ever. Number 6. Time to get oot. I am many things. Canadian, moderately funny, and a second-rate John Candy or Chris Farley. I love them both, but it depends where you're from. If you're Canadian, it's John Candy. If you're American, it's probably Chris Farley. What I'm not is a quitter. I'm a soldier, a fighter, a trooper, and I hustle my bustle, partner. I'm not shy to turn away from a challenge, and I strive to figure it out. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not afraid to throw in the towel. Sometimes you gotta know when to pull back, reassess, and most importantly, come back. If you come back, you never really quit, did you? If you come back, you're good. Take for an example some towns in central and eastern Sweden during 536 who abandoned their towns. No one is really sure why, but these towns were abandoned, obviously. Not that it's easy to run a town, because trust me, I play city builders, I would know, but it's speculated that already cool temperatures could have been made worse by the volcanic ash that covered the sky. Ooh yeah, you wouldn't want cold temperatures getting worse back then. Bad for you. Number 5, Violet Jessup. Miss Unsinkable. What if I told you that Miss Jessup was a survivor of the Titanic, Britannic, and the Olympic? I know, right? The Titanic should need no introduction. It always has been and will be immortalized by a James Cameron movie. But you may not know that the Titanic had sister ships, the Britannic and the Olympic. Miss Violet Jessup was a nurse on all 3. The Titanic hit an iceberg and sank, of course. The Britannic hit a sea mine and sank. The Olympic had a fender bender with another ship, but that one didn't sink. Just kind of a little bit of damage to the hull, but it made it back to shore, so that's good. Now, I'm not superstitious or anything like that, but the odds and luck of finding yourself on 3 of the largest vessels and surviving all of those 3 catastrophes? I don't know. Bad omen or good luck charm? Maybe just stay off that line of cruisers. Regardless, she is remembered as Miss Unsinkable and for her bravery in all scenarios, especially the Britannica. A severe head injury didn't even stop her. You go, girl. You go.
Number 4, Amelia Earhart. Almost everyone has heard of her at some point in their lives. Amelia Earhart's disappearance somewhere over the Pacific in July of 1937 is one of the world's greatest unsolved mysteries. Amelia Earhart was a female American aviator who set a literal ton of records and pushed for women advancing in aviation. She was the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic and the first to fly solo from Hawaii to the mainland. She served as a Red Cross nurse's aide in our home of Toronto during World War II and would spend her time watching pilots in the Royal Flying Corps train while hanging out there. She was the first woman to receive the Flying Cross's Military Medal awarded for heroism or extraordinary achievement while participating in an aerial flight. But it was in 1937 when she would try and fly around our lovely blue and green globe and would disappear into legend.
Number 3, refuse espionage. Alright folks, this is a new one for me. So during the Cold War, the eastern half of the world was cozying up to this brand new thing called communism. What? What's that? And what's better than that? The 2 major superpowers in the east were now both communists and cozying up to each other like Lenin in a Marx book by an open fire. Naturally, this made the West and America sweat. Make me sweat too. A lot of things do. It was concerning to say the least. Russia and China, socialist best friends. Everything was just peachy, except that Stalin did not exactly trust Mao. So to learn more about his new best friend, he had spies manipulate some things and was going to judge what kind of a leader he was off of a stolen stool sample. Yes, you heard that right. For example, a lack of potassium in your refuse could be related to something of a nervous disposition, not the kind of qualities you want in your dictator best friend. Kind of like reading astrology, but from the sewer.
Number 2, movies. Going to the movies, the smell of popcorn, awkward first dates, and memories of sticky floors with no explanation. I love going to the movies, but it wouldn't be possible without the invention of the cinematograph and the Lumiere brothers, Louis and Auguste. Louis Lumiere's cinematograph, which patented in 1895, was a combination movie camera and projector that would display moving images on a screen for an audience. The cinematograph was smaller, lighter, and used less film than the kinetograph and kinetoscope, invented by Thomas Edison. And in 1896, the brothers opened up the first theaters called cinemas to show what they made. They sent camera crews around the world to shoot new material. Did not take long for this tech to travel though. America opened its first cinemas in New Orleans the same year. In 1909, we got our first film review from the New York Times, the first Hollywood film studio in 1911, and Charlie Chaplin started his career in 1914. And now we have mega corporations that pump out blockbusters monthly. Nice.
Number 1, Elvira. So smart, this one, honestly, so five-head. So back in World War II, Germany went on tour. The tour included soldiers, ships, planes, and tanks. Mechanization, baby, nice. It's what we do. Now, any dad out there that's been doing small engine repair in the garage will tell you that sometimes a motor comes along that just stumps you. No matter how long you work on her, she just doesn't want to start. Only if you had a handbook to describe her inner workings. But you lost the manual years ago in the spring cleaning of '98. Ooh, sorry. Well, German soldiers had that manual, and to make them pay attention to said manual, there was illustrations of a gorgeous woman named Elvira who, on a lot of pages, would be missing parts of her clothing and or in revealing positions. So the equation goes tough engine repair plus book of knowledge multiplied by a pretty cartoon lady equals paying attention. What about the engine again?
Number 10. The Spanish Inquisition. Ah, yes. The Spanish Inquisition. The process of combating heresy, or as I like to call it, people not agreeing with you. See, when someone doesn't agree with me, I'll try my best to convince them otherwise. Or I'll just, I don't know, carry on living my life because what they believe is not my business. But not in Spain from 1478 to 1834, no sir. Here we have a guy called the Grand Inquisitor who was the head of the Inquisition in Spain. He was empowered by the Vatican to deal with heretics, however he deemed worthy, which seemed to be fire because there were over 2,000 burning at the stakes. More than 160,000 Jews were expelled from Spain, and those who remained, along with a heck of a lot of Muslims, were forced to convert. I could go on about how bad it was, but I got 9 other points to write here. Number 9. Ottomans stole my baby. How do you create a loyal army when a bunch of your subjects don't really trust or like you very much? You go the old First Order in the new Star Wars trilogy route, and you steal children and brainwash them. Duh. If you were a Christian family living in the Ottoman-controlled Balkans, Anatolia, or the Caucasus, you had to pay the blood tax. That means every 4 or 5 years, your Ottoman overlords would come along and take a male child under the age of 2 to be converted to Islam, and then educated as soldiers to serve in the Janissary. But hey, to make up for your forced brainwashing and enrollment in the military, you were paid, and you did get preferential treatment because, I mean, you don't even remember being not an Ottoman. Kinda messed up that you were used to fight against the same Christians who brought you into this world though. Number 8. Ottomans need to chill. The Ottomans were kind of the worst. Now, yes, that point of view was bolstered by the Christian parts of the world, so we can imagine they were a little biased. But when you're known for slaughtering humans to get things done, then yeah, you aren't going to be the first person invited to family dinner, you know? 2 great examples of Ottomans just going that extra mile would be in 1480 when they de-lifed the city of Otranto in Italy for not converting to Islam, and in 1571 when they took the city of Famagusta and made sure every Christian who lived there didn't see the following day. The Ottoman commander did some lovely things to the Venetian commander. He said, "Got your nose," and ears, gave him an unwanted ride around the city and presented him as a trophy to his sultan. This definitely provoked some Christian clapbacks though. Just take a look at the guy called Vlad the Impaler. Number 7. Christians need to chill too. Oh, did you think the Ottomans were the only ones out here committing atrocities? Surprise! Welcome to the real world, kiddo. European Christian rulers were not any better. You see, back in the day, many rulers decided to employ mercenaries such as the condottieri in Italy and the Landsknecht in Germany to fight their private wars for them. These mercenaries were here for one reason: money. And as such, did not go the normal warfare routes. Instead of attacking fortified positions, the condottieri would go around the countryside burning and looting. They would even bite the hand that feeds, like in 1527 when 14,000 Landsknecht sacked Rome after they were not paid. The Christian mercenaries were interested in one thing: cold hard cash, and no one was safe if they didn't get it. The Landsknecht were even said to not be allowed into hell for what they did in Rome. Number 6. The church is corrupt? No way! The church has always been political. But in the Renaissance, it became publicly political and corrupt. There were two main families whose members became the Pope, the Medici and the Borgia, and neither one of them was too great or even followed the rules of the church. Pope Alexander Borgia VI, for example, had 4 children with a mistress that he continued to see while he was the Pope. One of his sons became the Archbishop of Valencia at age 17. Which you won't be surprised to know is not the norm. On the Medici side of things, we have Pope Leo X, who was accused of taking part in sins like masquerade balls, selling salvation, nepotism, and excessive spending. The corruption got cleaned, but it took quite the event for that to happen.
Number 5, World War II. Well, surely after the most destructive conflict in human history, we wouldn't be so keen on another, right? Well, wrong. That could be the point right there, but the unusual event that started World War II was nothing. Just like that episode of Seinfeld, it was a war about nothing, George. I don't know. Well, not true, but let me explain. The factors leading up to World War II were all there. Fascism, communism, imperial expansion, again, revenge, unification. However, honestly, like a bunch of bad parents letting their kids get away with anything, nobody really did anything to stop Mustache Man. They used a policy called appeasement, which basically meant he wants something, he gets it. He wants something, he gets it. Not a great system. Okay, you can have that country, but no more. That's it. We appeased you enough. Oh, okay, you can have that one, but next time no more. That's it, for real. Oh, fine, you can have that one too, but now I'm putting my foot down. And after 4 or 5 countries fell to Mustache Man, that's when they finally did something. So really, it was neglect. Number 4, Jenkins' ear. 1731, Britain. They were looking for an excuse to attack Spain. After all, they've got a lot of loot and gold, and come on, that belongs to Britain. It's gonna go in our museum, come on, that makes sense. They had just about run out of hope until Jenkins walked into the room. Sounds like a joke, but it's true. Jenkins was an English sailor who had gotten into a confrontation with Spanish authorities 8 years prior. Sadly for Jenkins, it cost him his ear. They took off his ear, because that's what you do back then. And as soon as the British caught wind of his ear, well, it was on. So yes, they did start a war over a man's missing ear, because it's a good reason to steal gold. Number 3, the War of the Bucket. Modena and Bologna, 2 warring Italian city-states. One sponsored by the big man in the big hat, which is the Pope as they call him, I think, and the other was the Holy Roman Emperor. Big power struggle. Who's in charge? I don't know. This was kind of the way it went in ye olde medieval Europe. However, in 1325, it began to get a little spicy, as both Modena and Bologna would make a day out of raiding each other's cities, because even though we're pretty similar, we'll just attack each other, because yeah, sure. However, it got real serious when Bologna's bucket went missing. Oh! It started a war, and the real ironic thing is, it might not have been stolen at all and just blamed in confusion of a missing bucket. Medina steals a bucket, we gotta get him. How dare you take my bucket? It's kind of like when your sibling takes your favorite toy. You did what to my action figure? You know what I mean? Number 2, the console war. My generation probably remembers the PS3 versus Xbox 360 war. I'm pretty sure Chris remembers that, he does. See? But the real one was Sega versus Nintendo in the 90s. Well, how did it start? Okay, well, Nintendo was on a huge roll. Super Mario, Metroid, Zelda, you couldn't stop them. That was until the Sega Genesis released with the edgiest blue hedgehog ever to grace your old TVs. Millions of dollars in smear campaigns, Genesis does what Nintendo doesn't. I'm sure you guys all remember that commercial. It was a really powerful commercial. I learned about it in business class, so there you go, look at that. And number 1, the Russo-Japanese War. This one's crazy. How about a war, cause it'll make us look cool, said the advisors to Tsar Nicholas II, worried the Russian Empire didn't look so cool anymore because it's been failing for a while. And in a classic schoolyard tactic, let's find the weakest link and start there. Well, they thought it was Japan, but as it turns out, Japan wasn't that guy, pal. He's not that guy, pal. And they won, so very surprising literally everyone. So not only did a massive European power start a conflict with a puny island nation for bragging rights, but they also lost that war to a puny island nation for bragging rights. That's just crazy.
Number 10, Great Death Pit. If you were a Sumer king, you likely professed yourself a god and or a superhuman demigod. As such, your followers and members of court were required to treat you as such, with a level of devotion Andrew saves only for his collection of empty drink bottles he keeps at his desk. Can you please clean that up?
Hey!
What I'm sure Andrew doesn't expect from those empty bottles is that when he bites the dust, they too must do the same to accompany him to the afterlife. Sumerian kings absolutely did. The biggest example of this ritualistic offing would be the Great Pit of Delifing, discovered in 1922, which was the resting place of approximately 1,800 people, all of which served different kings and queens in the Sumerian capital city of Ur. Some of these followers may have been poisoned, others had a less than ceremonious demise as they had prominent holes in what should be rather intact parts of their skulls.
Number 9. Hanging Gardens. Here's a quote from Greek philosopher Strabo. The ascent to the highest stories by stairs, and at their side are water engines, by means of which persons appointed expressly for the purpose, and are continually employed in raising water from the Euphrates into the garden. Namaste. Yes, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon! I said it twice, oh my goodness, must be kinda cool. What a magnificent sight it must have been, a magnificent construction of beauty. Even predating the pyramids of Giza by a rough estimate of 5,000 years. We'll get to that later. Trouble is, this one is kind of a gray area. Here's the later. It could be completely made up by Strabo and others like him, or it could have been destroyed, as there are some depictions of a garden existing in a grand palace on the river Tigris near modern-day Mosul, but we're just not sure. We're not exactly sure. So, beautiful gardens, I hope they were there.
Number 8. Sumer. The Sumerians were the oldest known civilization in Mesopotamia. They created the first cities, and a large part of their success and the success of the Mesopotamians in general was due to the invention of irrigation. The land around the Tigris and Euphrates was not so great. It was fertile but prone to flooding pretty often. The solution was to divert water from canals into irrigation ditches. The Mesopotamians realized that the water supply from rivers was unreliable, so they dug a maze of ditches from the rivers to their fields. This created a reliable water source for farming. The crops fed the population, and farmers were able to trade the excess produce such as onions, garlic, apples, figs, grapes, and pomegranates. That's how the Mesopotamians really flourished.
Number 7. Hammurabi's Law. Law students and those taking the bar, rejoice, because I am talking about Hammurabi's Code. When folks were flocking into cities for the first time, the crime rate would have been something to take note of. Yeah. King Hammurabi made his code of laws, 282 to be exact, to give justice to all. Like in the commercial sector, for example, for those who steal. The principle of an eye for an eye, to make the punishment fit the crime. If you were caught stealing, then perhaps the removal of your arm that stole shall be an acceptable response. Now look, I'm not out here defending crooks. Don't steal, it's bad. But these laws, a little too cruel for me. I'd go through all of them, but well, you need to get back to your bar exam, so good luck out there, folks. I know you can do it.
Number 6. The Akkadian Empire. You know you're a big deal when it hasn't been done before you. The Akkadian Empire was literally the first ever empire. They were around for about 100 years and first came to be around 4,300 years ago. And they were big on improving roads and irrigation. Only problem is that irrigation doesn't really help you out much when it stops raining for 290 years. The large southern part of the empire was pretty dependent on the northern part for most, or more like all, of its crops and food. So when a drought struck and took away the food, a panicking northern population went to seek help from their southern brethren, who, in return for all the years of food, put up walls to keep them out. Boom, an inciting incident for a violent conflict that brings down an empire. It's that simple, kiddos.
Number 5. Tanks. Okay, so after a few Olympics, people got tired of walking those many miles just to see some dudes run a mile. We need more events, said the Olympic organizers, but what? We have athletes running, what else is there? Okay, I hear you. What if we get athletes to run, but with full military armor and gear on? Yeah, that's right. There was another race where athletes would wield the armor of the Greek soldiers and race. I can imagine that there was a clunking noise, or at least a lot of it, and also how difficult it must be to run in bronze armor. I'm gonna let you guys in on a little secret. Come a little closer. A little closer. A little closer. Whoa, too close. Bronze armor isn't good for chafing. Because let me tell you something, hot Mediterranean sun, not a lot of water, and running in hot metal attire? Someone's gonna have to come over and put baby powder on my bum bum. Number 4, the classic. I don't know why, but when I think of ancient Greeks, I think of grapes on the vine, marble, chariots, and the movie 300. It's kind of hard to forget those spray-on abs. Although someone could put them on me, it'd be kind of nice. Equestrian events were another event of the ancient Greek Olympics, and I have something nice to say about something for once. While every other event was dominated by males because, well, only males were allowed to compete of course, the equestrian events allowed women. Nice! And naturally, ladies, when someone points the spotlight on you, you shine. A notable winner of the event was Cynicica, a Spartan princess and athlete who was an excellent horse breeder. I guess that's a nice thing to be remembered by. According to some records, 2 monuments were built in honor of her victory. I rode a horse once. I can firmly say that I prefer the automobile. Just saying. You walk around like that, that's why all the cowboys walk like this. You just do that all that. Number 3, the long jump. After running in armor, it was discovered that jumping makes for a great Olympic event. How high? How far? It's simple, really. It should come as no surprise that I did not perform well in that section of track and field day at school. To my disadvantage, there was no strength-based events because it was considered unhealthy for us because we were so young. Yeah, I wasn't sure about that. My counter to that argument would be, why are you making tubby kids run the 1500 meter? That's liable to have the kid with asthma writing his math test in the hospital bed later. I'd probably be joining him. However, I am a supporter of the ancient Greek jumping event. Basically, athletes gotta jump as far as they can whilst holding 2 large rocks. Now, if we did that today, people would know what it's like to do a long jump when grandma feeds you too much. Yeah, it's not easy. Number 2, the discus, the javelin, and the hammer. Sounds like a good band. Hey, these are all events that we still compete in today. That's awesome, but doesn't it make you nervous when the athletes are throwing those bad boys around? Especially the hammer throw. God, it just makes me so nervous. While I couldn't find an exact example of an accident happening, I doubt the ancient Greeks had safety in mind for spectators. The discus was made from stone or bronze, and they were tossing those suckers the same way Guy Fieri tosses Caesar salad. Which is a lot because he's kind of a big guy too. However, for me, it's the javelin that's most terrifying, as that was an appropriate weapon of war for the time, and athletes are just throwing them around like it's nothing. You're telling me the crowd was a safe distance away from the splash zone? Yeah, just keep your eye in the sky to be safe, folks. I don't know about that. Number 1, rap battle. Honestly, this is something we should bring back to the Olympics. While I was complaining about not being able to compete in strength-based events earlier, I, as a theater kid, would have much preferred some of the other less intensive events the ancient Greeks had up to offer. The ancient Greeks were not just chucking stones and chafing in bronze armor. There was also a competition with the arts. Poetry, song, and singing. Imagine if America entered Eminem into a rap battle contest. There would be no contest. Imagine if Canada entered one for musicians. K.D. Lang, Celine Dion, and Anne Murray just singing angels.